All right, so today we're talking about set designers and set design first. Set designers design, prototype, and build the sets that are needed for the production. If a production needs sets, you should have a set designer to design how it's going to be built. This stuff comes from masterclass.com. So set designers, they establish a look and feel of the set and build it as required by the script. Production designers might make the sketches that an art director turns into technical drawings, and then they bring that to a set designer. So they might make something like this, and then the art director, well, I don't know if I have it. I don't have it. Basically, they're making a sketch, and then the art director will make a more informational, technical drawing of it, saying like what the length and the width and other classifications of that thing or that space are, and they can bring that to the set designer. Or set designers might be the ones to make that. It just depends on the set, who does what. The responsibilities will differ depending on each production and how they set it up. Set designers work closely with the set decorator, the art director, props masters, and the construction coordinator to bring a set to life. The director and art director will discuss what mood each set should have. Set designers will also work with the costume designer and gaffer to establish visual guidelines for how the world that they're building should look. Set designers may make rough sketches of the set and their own mood boards. So they might make a sketch something like this, or they might make some mood boards for the space, for the location and the area and how the set will be, what kind of materials it will be made out of, the color scheme that they're thinking, things like that, to get the visual ideas on paper or online. They want to do a digital mood board. And that way they can kind of get the architecture style and the sense of what they're going to do with this set. And they can bring that to the production designer and the director and make sure that it's going along with the director's vision and what the production designer has in mind for the look of the film as a whole. So it seems like many of the roles in the art department, they all kind of make their own mood boards. The production designer makes the mood board for the overall film and the look of everything. Then the costume designer might have their own mood board that's specifically for the costumes and the types of materials that might go in those costumes. The set designers, they use mood boards to kind of show the architecture, the style, the color scheme, and the layout sometimes of different set design ideas that they have to get the idea down just for them and also for everyone else so that they can help visually illustrate what they are trying to do. Because speaking of like telling somebody an idea is very hard through words, and it's a lot easier to show somebody what you're talking about if you can get references and get it close to what you're thinking. Oh, this is sort of what I'm going for. Is this what you're thinking? Instead of being like, oh, I think it should be a square spiral and it should be going up. That's a lot harder to visualize than just showing it to somebody. And that is why all of these art department people create their own mood boards to show everybody what they're doing and to have it in their head so they can keep referencing back to it. So they're not going off the path later on whenever stuff starts getting created. The set designer may decide to make a scale model of the set as a template. Oh, here's another mood board. So it might just be like outside locations, some ideas for the design and the architecture. You know, maybe they want it to be smooth and wavy and have that spiraling ceiling, and they want to make sure that they have something like that. So they have a few pictures in there, or they have like a very fancy looking all glass windows house, and so they're like, something like this is what we're going for the set. The set designer may decide to make a scale model of the set as a template for when they are going to build a real thing. So this one is, I believe this one's for a theater from the looks of it, but it just goes to show in theater and film, they might actually just make a little miniature scale model of the set that they're going for, so that they can see the layout, they can see that everything's working and the space is going to work for everyone's needs. And again, it's a way to illustrate it to everybody else. This is what we're going for, you know, this is the kind of thing I'm going for. And when that gets signed off on, okay, this is what the space is, this is what we're expecting it to turn out to be. So does this work with everybody? Is director, you like this? You know, does the cinematographer think there's enough space for filming? And everybody else, let's get everybody's say in on this and make sure that this works for everybody before we build it to scale. The set designers oversee the builders, designers, carpenters, electricians to build and construct this final set, making sure the crew is building the set that executes the vision accurately. They have their own budget that they have to be sure labor and materials don't go over. So they're over the construction crew, and they got to make sure that that crew doesn't cost too much. The materials for this set aren't going to cost too much over whatever budget they are given. And so that's another thing I've been seeing is everybody in the art department, it seems like all of the art department's very categorized, like with props and with costumes and with hair and makeup and everything else. And it seems like each of the roles that are over their smaller crew, when you start breaking it down and saying, well, this is the set construction crew, this is the set design team, the person over that, which would be the set designer, have their own budget that they have to go by and make sure everybody's following, and their own schedules to make sure everybody's coming in on time and delegating all the tasks correctly. And then the production designer and the producer are, the production designer is looking at the budget overall for the whole entire art department. And so if set design needs more money, they're like, hey, the director says he wants this to be made out of marble counters and he doesn't want anything fake, you know, but we don't have the budget for that. Can we get it, or are we going to have to tell him no or her no? And then the production designer will try to see if they can find part of the budget from other parts of the art department that they can give to set design and things like that. But every other person is over their own little budget. They have to make sure that they don't go over, because it starts to impact the entire budget of the entire film. Art department is the biggest part of most budgets. They take up the largest chunk of the money because there's so many people, there's so many teams, and all the materials and everything costs way more than a small crew or camera crew or something else, where they might cost a lot, but they don't cost nearly as much as 10 different teams in the art department, building sets and designing them and keeping the mood and the look of the film consistent. So that's something I've been seeing over and over again with all of these different positions. It's like, if you're at the top of if you're the props master, you have your own budget, you have your own schedule, and all your team work within that. If you're the set designer, you have the budget and the schedule for the construction crew, and you're making sure that they are working within that, and so on. Like I said, they make sure that the construction crew is working efficiently and according to the schedule. They never want to get behind. Sometimes set design, the sets will be getting built during filming. They'll be filming one scene. If it's a film, they'll be filming some location that's already done. If it's not a set, they'll be on location shooting or whatever. And they might be building the set during that time. So it's not all complete before everything begins. Sometimes they are building one set for the next scene while the other scene is getting torn down because it's complete, while another scene is getting filmed. And so they might be in stages. On a TV show, they're definitely going back and forth with sets. Sometimes they try to leave them up. Most of the time they try to leave them up on TV because TV continuously reuses sets usually. But if it's one of those shows that goes in different locations, then they are going to be working on one set while the episodes of another are being filmed. And so they have to constantly be on schedule so that it's ready whenever the production and the camera crew and everyone need it. Set designers need to know how to build a set, even if they usually aren't physically building it themselves. They need to know about what kind of materials are used and how to make it safe and how to build it as cheap as they can without it being unsafe, and how to make it look real and how to build it to the specifications needed. Even so that way they can make sure that the people underneath them, the actual construction crew, the builders, are doing it correctly. So the set designers are usually leading the teams. They're not, depending on the budget, depending on how big the crew is, they won't be actually physically creating the set. They'll just have the design, and they'll have what am I trying to say? They'll have the blueprint for it, and they will make sure that everybody's following that blueprint to get it done the way that was agreed upon by everybody else. Set designers read through the script, paying close attention to any set elements and location cues. They research specific time periods and locations. Also, sometimes the set design can be very complicated to make it work for the film's needs. Set designers may make 3D digital models of the set for reference if it's being created physically, or create the digital outline if it's going to be CG for the CGI team to fully create. So they may be the ones making the, where is it? Like a digital set for if they need to expand it in post-production. They will be the ones to design the 3D elements to show how they would like the set to be, and then the actual CGI creators will take that and they'll run with it to make the set look how the designer made it out to be. Or they'll just make a 3D model to kind of show, if it's a big set especially, they'll make a 3D model and they'll show this is what we're going for, and then they'll also make it on the design and the blueprint of it so that they can physically build it. But that way, it's kind of like making a model and showing the scale model of what it is, but it's just doing it digitally instead, so that you can kind of do a roundabout. You can move a camera around and see it in all directions, make sure it's going to work properly, and it's what the director envisions for what they had planned for the shots. Some sets are a lot more complicated than others, so set designers need to be able to know how to make something that's going to work functionally for the film and, like, again, safe. From the scene from Inception, had the hallway that was spinning around. Well, it was actually on this big, huge contraption that was physically spinning that room around so that they could move around, and the camera was just going upside down and rotating around to capture the moment in whatever angle they want, whether they wanted it right side up or upside down. They could do it, but they had this actual room that could spin around. And so the set designer needed to know, needed to be able to come up with an idea, come up with a plan to make something this complicated, to make sure it's going to function as needed for the crew and for the director. Or you might have a set that is very large, like the set of Hobbiton and the Lord of the Rings. It was actually, I don't remember the exact number, but it was several acres of land that they just hid little, they did the Hobbit holes in the sides of the hills, and it was scattered throughout the whole place. So it was a big undertaking to get that done. And I believe they said it took like 9 months or something just to get it done, because there was so much that they had to do. But that way the director was able to shoot in any direction, and it would look like it's a real place. And so they did that to give it some, to give the director some extra options to use whenever they were going to go shoot there. I actually heard that they also weren't able to really tear them down. They were having a lot of trouble because there was so many of them. And so they weren't able to really tear down all of them in time. And so they kind of just left some of them up, and New Zealand started using that as a tourist attraction. And now you can actually go there and you can visit this place and see the set with Hobbiton, where it's just like these nice, beautiful hills, and it has these little Hobbit houses to the front doors and everything on the ends of it.
They even used, I don't know if you guys ever saw this, they even used it in their airline commercials for Air New Zealand. They used the attractions of Lord of the Rings and the scenes of the movie, but also the attractions as like a main reason to fly Air New Zealand. And it was really cute and really funny. And even to this day, they still like will show it, even though it's been years.
Yeah, it's really cool. So does anyone have any questions, comments, or anything to add about set design? All right, so moving on from set design. Oh, also set design, sometimes it might be pretty simple seeming. It might just be like a room, or it might just be like a small house or something, but it could actually be a lot more complicated to get done depending on what's needed than what you might think, which is why set designers are usually needed to make sure that it's gonna be exactly what is needed for the director and the producer and everybody.
Yeah, did you cover the part where they go to like historians to find out, like because I did sound audio work for a period piece called Macbeth, and we really didn't have a set designer, but we had an expert that was like a history buff that knew, because all the locations we were at were in Annapolis, Maryland, and there were like the main location we shot at was this it was like a museum, but it was like kind of like it was like a mansion, but it was like a museum at the same time. So like they just
like an estate.
Yeah, like, you know, something. It was like a period, one of those historic places. You know, they kept it intact and stuff like that. And we had a history expert there, and I remember she was always. It was the thing where we couldn't shoot. She didn't want us to shoot a particular statue at one location because she was like, that statue wasn't made until this time, so it goes against that. And she was saying there were certain places we couldn't shoot because of like, it just wasn't the style for the period of time we were trying to do or something like that. So that also comes into play as well. Like when you do, especially when you're doing like period pieces. So like I know when they do Pirates of the Caribbean, like, there's a history buff on set that will say, oh, well, they didn't dress like this in this period of time, or they didn't wear the wigs like that, or like this, or whatever.
Right.
That's just my 2 cents on it. So there's other things that come into play as well. Like you kind of want to do, I'm pretty sure you mentioned doing your research, but like just having an expert there on set to kind of give you a little bit lessons, like, and there's also the World War II reenactments that they do. Like I think that's where she was coming from, and she does a lot of those too. And just knowing the history of it. So that's just my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's important with any kind of period piece, even with like battles, how people moved, how they talked, like different things they might do with their like different hand gestures and things like that. They certain movies and certain shows will get like you said, a historian or somebody who's an expert in that specific thing. Like they'll actually get doing a Viking show. Oh, we have this historic expert that's, he did his master and he did his whatever and in Viking history. So like they know everything about Vikings, and they'll help you get it as accurate as possible. And then they'll decide whether they want to take their advice and go straight with it, or be like, okay, but we're going to take some creative liberties with it. But it definitely helps to have somebody there to really fact check everything, which, a lot of things will do. Some of them don't do it. And that is when the set designer, the production designer, the costume designer, the art director, everybody's going to have to do their own research to make sure their part is accurate to that time period, or at least accurate enough so that the audience will buy it. But it does definitely help a lot on different, like, because then that's when like the stuff starts slipping through the cracks, I feel like. So I feel like it's definitely better to have somebody who is an expert if you're able to. With the fights too, like with the way battles are done, and like what kind of weapons people use, all that stuff is always very particular to the time period and the location that it's set in. So having actually somebody there who has studied it for years and knows as much as they can about it really makes it more realistic and makes the audience be able to believe it more and just focus on the story rather than being like, oh, they didn't have that sword, and that's not how the Romans fought, and all those types of things. So a set design, architecture is a huge thing. What kind of architecture was in the location? What kind of architecture was in that time period? And how spread apart were towns? You know, if you're making a Western, how close was everything together? There's a bunch of different things that go into that type of thing where you have to think about, if you don't have a historian there, even if you do, the set designer will still have to do their own research on it to make sure they're getting it close. The materials that are used, you know, what kind of materials did the people use in 1920? What kind of materials did they use in 1300? You know, all those types of things have to be taken into account. And that's another thing I was saying with all of these different roles too. Everybody does the research. So they all kind of like do similar things, but for their own mini department within the art department. It feels like they all do research, they all do scheduling, and they all do budgeting, and make sure that those things all fall in line with the overall look that the production designer and ultimately the director have envisioned for the film or the show. Well, I guess the showrunner if it's a show, not the director, but yeah. All right, so set decorators. Set decorators are concerned with the walls, the floors, any vehicles that are there, furniture on the set. They dress the set to give it style and relate it to the story, characters, and theme of the film. Set designers will build the space, but it's like moving into a new home. You have the layout, but now you have to fill it in with the items that you picked out to make it unique to you. The kind of artwork or things you have hanging on the walls, if you have any mats or rugs, where you put the things, the kind of furniture you have, the curtains, the style, all that stuff will come into play. And that is when you get a more detailed space. So you can have that empty space and the set designer made the thing on the left and they made it. Maybe they even added the chandelier, who knows? But the set decorator now needs to come in and figure out, okay, what kind of furniture goes with this place, but also shows the character. Are they going to have it matching, or is this character more like they don't care? They just got this place for free. Their mom bought it for them. So they're not, and they just live life in a different way. So they don't really care about the way it all looks and if it matches and if it really feels like it goes together. So maybe they have furniture that is exactly opposite of looking like it matches and matches the aesthetic of the room. But the set decorators also think about, like, are these walls going to be changed? Do we need to paint them? Do we need to put any wallpaper over them? You know, or are we going to leave them out as they are? But the set designer will be the one that creates the layout of that location, the floors, what materials are used to build it, and that kind of thing. On a smaller set, a set decorator and a set dresser will be the same person, but on a larger set, a dresser works underneath the decorator. So the set decorator will be the lead, the set decorator will be the lead in the set decoration department, I guess you could say. It's like a little mini department within the art department again. So set decoration, set dec crew, they will be the ones underneath the set decorator, and they'll be like set dressers and other people like that, other roles that will follow what the set decorator has planned for the decoration within the room or within the location. Set decorators are going to meet with production designers, props masters, set designers, and other members of the crew to discuss the aesthetic, the tone, the mood, the theme, and the look of each scene. They'll also have meetings to determine who is responsible for what. So for instance, a chair an actor sits on, that usually falls under props department, but on some sets, it might be under the set decorator and their team. So it just depends, and they have to really make sure in the meetings that they're working that out. Are we getting all the furniture, or are we showing you what furniture we're getting, and then you guys are going to handle the props, you know, the furniture that the actors are going to sit on, or are we just going to get everything and then you guys are going to claim it? They make sure to do those meetings to hash out all the details, make sure everything is there, everything is looking good and matching what the director and the production designer are going for, as well as making sure every department knows what is their responsibility and what isn't. This stuff comes from studiobinder.com. Set decorators lead the set decoration department within the art department. They typically have a lead person, which acts as a key set dresser underneath them. The lead person helps coordinate work with all the other set dressers. The line producer or the first AD sends the set decorator the initial script breakdown that lists some set dressing elements that are needed. Then the set decorator will read the script, identifying characters and what their rooms or spaces might feel like or might be like. A lot of the elements for the set decoration won't be in the script. And even if it is, what kind, how big is it, and other details need to be thought of. The script may say that they eat at the table. So now we know there's a table, but how many can it fit? How many people can sit at that table? How big is it? Is it modern? Is it an antique table? What kind of style is it? What is it made out of? Is it wood, metal, plastic, hard plastic? What is happening in the scene as well? What needs to be done in the scene? Are there any unique things that the table needs? Like, does it need to be easy to turn over? Are they going to start getting shot at and they need to turn this table over so that they can hide behind it? Does it need to look thick enough to where it would stop bullets? All these little details for each individual scene need to be thought of as well for how it's going to be used, as well as the character and the aesthetic as a whole, and making sure that it matches with the production designer stuff, but also that it matches the characters and that it makes sense for the scene. And then, you know, other little details could be something like, did the characters buy that table or was it given to them? Because sometimes, you know, you might have your parents, you might have family members that help you out with move and they're going to buy something for you, or they're going to give you their old table. Well, maybe they got it from their mom and dad. And like this decorator will think of all those things and then they will put it all together to make it unique to that situation. And those kinds of things, they're not going to be really stated in the script, at least most of the time. It won't be like, unless they specifically say, yeah, my mom gave me this table in the script, they're just going to be eating at a table in the script and you have to figure out which one is it, what kind is it, what does it look like, and all of those types of things. Here's another example of what it could look like if they're just building the set without filling in all this stuff. So the set designers on the left, they thought of those doorways and the windows and the big wide open space. And the set decorator comes in and fills it in with the drapes and the TV and what kind of electronics and furniture and carpet do they use, or a rug, and makes it look unique. This stuff comes from screenskills.com. So once a set is done, the set decorator and their team are responsible for taking it apart, removing all elements that they added in. When props and set decoration are done setting up a location, it's called a hot set, which means nobody goes in. Nobody goes in unless they absolutely need to, and they have to get permission for it, unless it's like the producer themselves or something. They can't move anything or touch anything because it's going to get out of like the way it's set up is exactly how they want it, and they want to make sure that it stays that way, especially if they've already filmed in there and they're going to lunch or something. They want to make sure nothing gets moved around or misplaced, lost, broken, stolen, and make sure everything stays where it was for continuity. But even before continuity, they want to make sure nobody's touching it and moving it around, because they specifically set it up in a very specific and peculiar way to make sure that it's going to work in frame for what they are planning to shoot there. So once they have it completely set up and ready to go, hot set, nobody goes in there. Most productions usually have either like a PA or another crew member watch over hot sets or any sets with filming in progress so that nobody goes in. Set decorators need to understand film and how background can tell a story. They need to have a good eye for decoration with attention to color and attention to detail. Set decorators need to be able to research to match decorations to locations and the era. Set decorators could have assistant set decorators, buyers, set dressers, set decoration coordinators, drapers, and cabinet makers, sculptors, and more working underneath them in their team, depending on how many people are needed for that. So there's a lot of people that can actually go under set decorating, depending on how many people they need for that team in particular. They work very closely with props masters, art directors, and answer to the production designer. Set decorators have their budget and schedule and have to decide if it's best to buy, rent, or create the set dressing elements. So there you go. Again, they're over their set decorating crew, their team, and they need to make sure that everything's under budget and everything is going along with the schedule. And that's when they decide, is it going to be cheaper? Is it going to be more efficient to buy these things? Or is renting it going to be better? How long do we need it? How many do we need? Is creating it from scratch, do we have to because it's so unique that we have to make it ourselves? Or does it just make more sense because it'll be cheaper in the long run? Those kinds of things have to be figured out by them. They find and secure the dressings or delegate someone to and keep track of every dressing element. Some elements that are in set dressing are practical lights. So like in this scene, and that's when they would work with the cinematographer and the gaffer to help match that kind of, is this going to work for the lighting situation that you guys have planned? Because the practical lights are the ones you see in frame. So it's like this lamp on the table, but that is a set dressing element because it is part of the set as a whole. So there again, that could fall under technically, it could be either the gaffer and their team, the lighting crew, or it could be the set dressing crew. I think typically it's the set dressing crew that handles those, and they just make sure that the gaffer and cinematographer agree on it, as well as the production designer, of course. But I'm not sure. It could also be that it sometimes falls into the gaffer. It just depends on the production and who's responsible for what, which is why those production meetings are so important. I also need to figure out the kind of technology. So what kind of TV, laptops, desktop computers, phones, home systems, that kind of stuff. Any kind of electronics. They figure out what kind would this character have, and how big is their TV? Is it a flat screen TV? Do they not care about TV very much, so they just still have an old one that's really boxy and ugly? Or what is this set in 1980 when the TVs were really ugly and bigger and they didn't have flat screen TVs? Then you better not get one. So that's the kind of stuff they have to make sure to watch out for. Like Brian was talking about with set design and set decorating, they need to make sure that it matches the period and it matches the location during that period. Any kind of art. What kind of art do these people have? Do they have a lot? Do they have maybe one picture hanging up? Do they have any art? Those are things that they need to figure out. Pictures and frames. Do they have pictures of them and their family, or just their pets, you know, what kind of pictures and frames might they have. Furniture, again, what kind of furniture do they use? And is it antique? Is it modern? What color is it? Drapery, what kind of drapes, what kind of curtains, window curtains do they use? Floor coverings, do they have any? What kind, what color, what kind of design? Books, if you ever see a library in a film or you see a shelf of books, they're the ones that are responsible for dressing all of that. What kind of books do they have? Does it matter? How close are we going to be to these books anyway? And if we're close enough to see them, you know, what kind of books do they have? Is it just science stuff? Is it astrology? Is it entertainment books? You know, what kind of stuff is it? These characters. For exteriors, they'll figure out the exterior furnishings, street lamps, what kind of street lamps might be there, what the design of them would be. And you can see there's a bunch of different kinds you can get. And there's even more than this, of course, depending on what period of time you're in and where you're at. Traffic lights, they're over that. So if they have to set up a fake traffic light scenario, then they'll be the ones to do that. Also, did you guys know that those are that big? I didn't, but I saw that and I was like, dang, that's huge looking compared to what you think when you see it in the car. Old Western water troughs, anything like that, or like a water tower. That's the kind of stuff that set dressing will most likely be responsible for. Water tower could fall under set construction, so it could be the set designer, not the set dress decorator, but again, it depends. Any kind of garden furniture, if they have any outdoor furniture or patio furniture, like that falls into them. And any kind of sculptures or garden art or anything that they might have outdoors in their yard and their garden will fall under set decorating. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or anything to add about set decorators?
So as I mentioned for my past scene, I went through a lot of the processes that you were just going over. But you know, because I'm low budget, like there was only so much that I could physically afford to control. So the first step was you know, the design. So I had to pick, you know, I was telling you guys I had to find a spot, either Airbnb or Pure Space or a friend or somebody that had an apartment or a room with, my biggest thing was the industrial windows, which is what I was looking for, because that was really going to sell that wherever this hospital was, it was in a building of some sort. So that was one thing. I needed a room with industrial windows. And then another thing was I was looking for was, you know, hospitals have like a whole bunch of like panels and gadgets plugged into the walls. So obviously, I mean, I could have tried, but I wasn't going to go to that extreme. So another thing I was looking for, it had to have white walls, industrial window, and I found a couple on Pure Space, but it's like I was just having trouble with the owners, like they weren't responding. So I found a spot on Airbnb, and you guys saw the steel frame, and we took the bed, we lined it up against the window, and then the next thing was the props, which was really going to sell everything. And then the actress was wearing the hospital gown, so that goes in the costume design. And we actually did research to figure out, you know, which side does the name tag go on, where do they normally stick IV, which side did they try to put it on. We did a whole bunch of research on that, me and the cinematographer. What kind of lights do you typically find in a hospital, where they go? So like you know, we did a lot of research for that. And normally in hospitals, they always have the light up in the ceiling. It's like a fluorescent light on the ceiling. so it's just those things that like the small details that we really focused on to try to like make it all work. And then I still have the props, so the railings on the arms. So there, I actually went on YouTube to, because like I felt like I think I told you guys this. I found a hospital, but it was in Delaware, and I wasn't really going to go out. You know, you want a, and that's the thing. Hollywood now is getting more and more bigger on actually using physical locations as opposed to using sets, which is cool. But not only that, but like if you notice, like hospitals in Hollywood they look different. If you've ever been in a modern day current hospital, it looks a little different from the movies nowadays. Like the movies their hospitals are still a little bit dated because I think there's an actual building, like it's not a hospital, but it's a set, but it's like a fully functioning hospital, but it's dedicated to like hospital shows and a whole bunch of that. I think they have like that on. So I think I read somewhere that there's like an actual hospital that was dedicated to, you know, TV shows like House and ER and all those other shows.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, so that's where I think a lot of big Hollywood goes to now. But yeah, before, like Hollywood was like outdated. Like I actually compared the scene that I shot for Kill Mary to the scene with actual Kill Bill, and I was like, my hospital looks more legit than theirs. You know what I mean? Because like theirs was like way out. I mean, it was an old movie too, but like I was like, yeah, okay, we actually pulled it off. So yeah, Hollywood is getting bigger and bigger on using like actual locations and stuff like that. But I think now what kind of slowed them down is like, you know, COVID and stuff like that. So definitely, like, I'm pretty sure they reverted back to just going back to the set or whatever. But yeah, the small details are like a lot of the things I try to take in consideration, like which arms does the name tag go on. I got the hospital gown for my actress to wear, which went into the. And then, you know, I kind of told her, I was like, make your, you know, don't come in with a fresh, you know, straight from the hair salon. Make sure your hair is a little messed up.
Right.
And I think we pulled it off. It was great. It was pretty great. But it's just a lot of things that I had to like take and consider, like things that I was like, I don't have to actually fully pull it off a real legit hospital room. I would have loved to, but I was like, there's things I can do to kind of cue to it. And I think I pulled it off. What else was I going to say about that? Yeah, there was the arm rails, which were like $40 each. The IV bags. I still have all those, the stuff I use, the props to save it. So I'm going to put those in a closet and just put in my shed. So just in case, like stuff that I know, because, you know, hospital gear, you can't return. So I'm just going to hold on to it just in case I need to do it again for whatever reason, for whatever movie I have the ability to do it. Because I spent I think the most expensive thing was the Airbnb. But like if you know somebody or have a plug, like you can save yourself a whole bunch of money as opposed to just getting, you know, going through the trials and tribulations of getting the hospital room. I think you could just make your own setup. And I think we pulled it off. It came out pretty decent. So
awesome. Yeah, and that's you actually mentioned something that's really important for all of the art department. Really, is when they're doing it well, you're not really going to notice. You shouldn't really notice it, and that means they did a good job. Is what a lot of the roles are saying. Like, because you shouldn't notice that there's set dressing. You shouldn't notice that the room was created for this purpose. You should just look at it and think, oh, this looks like, you know, it looks like a room in a house. You shouldn't be like thinking, oh, you know, they turned the chair this way because of that, and they took those colors because it clashes with that, so it gives it some dimension and all that stuff. So whenever these people that are doing these jobs are doing it well, or if you are like Brian and you're doing it all yourself, and or you know, with a smaller crew, and you're making it look like a hospital room, most people that watch it shouldn't have to question if it's a hospital room or not. If you did it well, they're just going to assume you filmed in a hospital, which is great because that's exactly what you want. And so that's an interesting thing, that these people do a lot of work, and if you're doing the art, any kind of art design, you're gonna see it too, because you do a lot of work on the graphics and what kind of furniture and researching and everything, like to make sure everything's right. And then like if people aren't noticing it, that's the best thing, because they're just enveloped in the story at that point. They're believing that this is happening, and that's exactly what it's for.
Speaking of research, so like when I finally caved in and made the decision that I was gonna go ahead and fake the funk and make a fake hospital room, the first thing I did was I went on YouTube to try to get some advice. And surprisingly, there's like one video on, making fake hospital. I was under the impression that like I was gonna get like, because everybody does the movie thing now. I thought everybody was gonna do it, but no, like there's one video on how to dress up a room. Well, it wasn't even on the room. It was about hospital beds and making this guy made bed railings out of PVC pipe. And then I was like, well, I can just go on Amazon and buy those. I mean, it would have been cheaper. I would have saved a lot of money, but it's just, I don't know. It would have been a lot of work to try to sell the PVC pipe, because you would, what did he do? He did it, and then he like spray painted it. And I was just like, that still looks like PVC pipe, but yeah. So now, like, I think I'm probably gonna put my own little video out there, because there's no videos out there on there, surprisingly. Like I thought there was gonna be like a whole bunch of experts out there who's gonna show me how to make it look legit, but there surprisingly there was nothing out there for that. I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah, like it's crazy, because it seems like there, like you said, it seems like there would be, because everybody's filming, especially short films, and YouTube and cameras getting cheaper, so everyone's trying to make films now. But man, it's like some of the stuff, it's impossible to find specific dedicated information to it from people who know what they're talking about. And so yeah, I totally agree. But that is also a good point you brought up, that if you didn't have the budget to buy the handrails, then that is a good alternative. And that is also what all the people in the art department have to do, is they have to figure out, how can I get this done with the budget that I have, or the budget that I don't have, is really the question.
I feel
and how can I work around this and get the things I need to make it look good without, needing 2 to 3 times as much of the budget as I have. Go ahead.
I feel like we ran into something similar. Like I've said many times, like we ordered a table. The table was way too small. We ended up spray painting a table to try to make it look like a metal table, and used a lot of lighting, and like I'm sure it didn't look great. But at the end of the day, it's all about creativity and working with what you have. But also, if you can, do your research as much as possible. Because it's way more accessible than it was back in the day, and that's amazing. And today you can find so much information and so many dupes of things, and so many really like detailed looking fake stuff, that looks really good. Mm-hmm. I also wanted to like point out that it really depends on the story you're trying to oh my goodness, it really depends on the oh my goodness, 1 second, Palmer's calling me.
All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to TV pilots for a second, but you can come back when you're she's out. All right, so TV pilots, what are they? This is from wisetour.com. Let me make sure that this is in the syllabus. It actually might not be. Oh, actually, it's wisegeek.com for that. All right. A TV pilot is the first episode of an intended series. Some actual first episodes are never actually released, and the pilot well, the first episode that airs anyway, is remade because of low quality, any legal issues, cast changes, or other reasons. TV pilots are made to test if the show is viable and marketable. So let's come back in. Many pilots never air or become full season shows because no network shows any interest in it. So they never show that pilot. And even if they do show the pilot, they never get a full season or show because nobody wants it. All right, go ahead, honey.
Hey, sorry, Palmer was calling. I was just going to say that it also really depends on the world you're trying to make, because I feel like there are exceptions to where you're trying to make a world look unique and different purposefully. And as long as it doesn't look super fake and super cheap looking, it doesn't have to necessarily look like every single hospital and a normal everyday new right now thing, so that's also something to take into consideration. Like, even when you're trying to create a different world or a different or base or whatever it is, keep that in mind too. You can make it look unique and still make it look like it's not a set. Look like something that could actually be part of the real world.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you want to do. You want to try to make it believable, make the people not pay attention to that, even in the back of their mind. You don't want them to be thinking like something's off, something's weird. And that is where all of those little details really come in and really make a difference. Like Brian and Priscilla were saying, those little details make all the difference in the world, because if people have been in a hospital, then like recently, then they are going to see, if it's not supposed to be set in the past, if it's supposed to be a modern day hospital, they're going to tell the difference because they've already been in the hospital. But the closer it is to the actual real thing, the less they're going to pay attention to it, and the less it's going to be called attention to in the back of their head. It's like, something's weird in this scene. What's weird? And then like trying to figure out and get taken out of the story because they're like, that IV bag is way different than the ones they use, or the way they set it up is not at all how they do it in real life. And so those little details really make a difference in how it's
I would also suggest think about what are the scenes that are going to linger on for longer, that are zooming in, and what are the scenes that are going to be from farther away. So obviously you're going to try to make everything look as good as possible. But when we're working on a budget, especially indie films, there are certain things that we will have to focus on more, and others where we can kind of like, we're still going to put effort in, but we can maybe put the budget more towards this than that. So that's another.
It's going to be a blurred out background. You don't, like, if you know it's going to be a blurred out background, then you don't have to put as much detail into it because it's going to be blurred out. Do as much as you can, but like we're still saying, like, on a budget, you really have to figure out those things. And that's why it's important for the, if you have a set decorator, if you have a set designer, to discuss these things with the cinematographer and the director, make sure that
especially with the cinematographer. Sorry, honey. Especially with the cinematographer and the director, because you need to know, hey, how long are you going to linger on this shot? Because there have been times where I watched a show or a movie or whatever, and they lingered on a shot, and the more they zoomed in, the more fake it looked, or the longer they stayed on that shot, the more fake some aspects of it looked, or the more obvious it was that it was a set. And so if you get the go, like, oh, this shot we're going to linger on for longer. Okay, okay, I need to make sure that this shot looks as realistic as possible. This one's going to be in the background. Okay, I can transfer a little bit of the budget to another shot. It's a little more important.
Now, the bad thing about that, being on a budget like that and doing it that way, which sometimes you have to, especially in independent scenes.
Yeah, obviously, I'm thinking about emergencies and like budget and yeah.
Right. I'm just saying, like, when you are going to do stuff like that, just make sure that the director and that you discuss everything and then they know what they want, because they can't change their mind on set. Because if that stuff doesn't look as good and they're trying to change their mind and be like, oh, well, maybe if we do it like with this lens instead, that's going to change everything that was discussed before. So it has to have a lot more pre-production work to make sure everything's going to, go as planned. Test
That's a good
test
point.
the things, test shots, test the if it's going to look good in camera. You only need it to look good in camera, And so as long as it looks good in camera, it can look ugly as crap in real life. If it looks good in camera, if it looks real in camera, that's all you need. So those are some things to keep in mind, especially on the independent side of things. All right, so TV pilots. Again, this comes from ystewart.com. A TV pilot is the first episode, quote unquote, first episode of an intended series. Because some actual first episodes that are made, which are the TV pilot that launches the show, they never actually get released. And the quote unquote pilot, which is actually the first episode that airs, is remade because the other one was too low of quality or it had some kind of legal issue with it. Maybe it took too long to come out. The studio or the network held on to that pilot for a while and they held on to the rights of the show, but they didn't want to produce it right away. They didn't want to create it right away. So the cast member dropped out. And so if it's a major character, they might reshoot the pilot. Sometimes you'll see in older shows, probably newer ones too. I don't know. But I know at least in I think it was Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and some other shows like that, the mom or somebody changes because, maybe on the pilot episode, there were one actor, but then the TV show took too long to get picked up or took too long to actually get released and created to where that cast member dropped out and they moved on to something else. So now they need somebody else to fill the role. And so then if it's not too much of a major character, the show will sometimes just go ahead and show that pilot, even though the new actor is going to obviously be different than the other one. They just go with it because it's cheaper than remaking the entire pilot episode. But if it's like a major character, if it's the main actor, the lead character, they will most likely reshoot the pilot if it's a different actor at that point.
Older shows, you can see that a little bit more than the more modern ones. I feel like back then the studios were a lot on a much tighter budget, so it happened a lot more often than it does now, but it still happens every now and then. But that was I don't know if the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was the best example because that was more of a whole season than one character.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, more than one. It was either one or more than one. And it was basically because the incompatibility issues.
Well, either way, sometimes they will, in a pilot episode, sometimes you'll see different actors than you see in the rest of the episodes.
The Ross's ex-wife from Friends, I'm pretty sure she was in the first season, or not even the whole first season, but in the first few episodes, she was one actress. And then in the next few, she was another. And they never even acknowledged it. They just went right ahead.
Yeah, because sometimes you don't want to call attention to it. Maybe people don't really notice. They just remember, oh yeah, he had that ex-wife.
I didn't know it was just another blonde in me. When I was older, I was like, oh, yeah, she does look different.
All right, so TV pilots, they're made to test if the show is viable and marketable. Mini pilots, they never get aired or never become full seasons or shows because no network wants it. Sometimes one network will produce a pilot and another will pick up the show and air it. So one network thought they wanted it, they saw the pilot and they were like, we don't want it anymore. We like the script, but seeing the execution of it, it's not for us, not for our network. And then another network might pay them to pick up the show. This happens with seasons too, but we're talking specifically about pilots right now. So first episode, if they don't like it, they might try to sell it to another network. Does anybody else want this? Because we don't. And they might buy it and then create the rest of the show or the rest of the season anyway. That's when the original network is uninterested after the pilot is created. Generally, networks will give a go-ahead to writers and producers and will fund a pilot episode for a script or idea pitched to them, or for materials and scripts the network has or owns. So sometimes the networks will buy out scripts from people, pilot episode scripts, and just hold on to them for a while. And maybe they have a script that is about teenage vampires, and they're holding on to it because they like the script, but they know vampires came and went already. So if vampires come back in and now they're cool and popular again, then they might try to make that show, and they'll already have that script. So they'll just hire a crew to make the pilot episode to see, is this actually so good?
Yeah, it's like the conversation we were having a few weeks ago about how they will follow the trends, but that doesn't mean they won't buy and keep certain things that they like, because they know that trends repeat themselves.
Yep. And so they might buy the scripts and hold on to them, or they'll have people, writers and producers, that come up to them and have a pitch and pitch them a pilot script and, the TV Bible and lookbook and all that stuff to say, hey, this is the kind of show we want to make. This is our first episode script, and here's our ideas for the rest of the season. What do you think? And if they get picked up, then the network will generally be funding the pilot. So they'll give them enough money to make a pilot episode, and then they'll see if they like it, and then they'll decide whether they want to fund it more for more episodes or a whole season, or how they want to go about doing it. A network that is interested in a TV pilot may use test audiences as well to see how the pilot may be received. So they might see it, like it, think it has a chance, and they'll get test audiences. Maybe they think the audience will be people in their late 30s, guys and girls. And so they'll get an audience full of them, and they'll test it against them, and it didn't work with them. Let's try it. And if they still believe in the product, they'll try it with another test audience, and they'll keep doing that, seeing if it works with anybody. Or they'll just get a mixture out for the first test audience. They'll just get a mixture of everybody and see what the reactions were. And if they don't get a good enough response, they might decide not to go ahead and produce the rest of the season. They might decide to basically just put that on hold or just cancel it entirely. If the test screenings go well, they may decide to produce the series, or at least then one season, or a few episodes at least. Sometimes a TV pilot is also left on the back burner for a while as the network tries to create shows that are currently popular. So sometimes they like the TV pilot and they hold on to it. But again, if it's that vampire show and they went ahead and made the pilot episode and they really like it, they might not want to put it out right now because they don't feel like there's an audience for vampires as much as there was a few years ago or something. So they'll hold on to it and see if it comes back. Like Priscilla said, everything's in cycles. So once that cycle comes back, we'll put it out there. But because they're holding on to it in the back burner, that's when those actors start to change, because the actors aren't going to wait around for 10 years for that rest of the season and the show to finally get produced. Some of them might come back, but like they might look different and all these things. So that's when they might need to redo the pilot episode if they feel like that's viable in the future, when they decide that it might work if vampires come back. Also, the showrunner might be different. Anybody who started writing a TV pilot, if it's held in the back burner for too long, they might just hire a different crew entirely to create the show. So something that started out as a really good idea, if they get the wrong crew, if they get the wrong minds for it, that's when those shows can start to go off the rails, because the original creators, the original people who had the idea, are no longer connected to it. And you don't really hear about that because they're kind of unknown. And so you don't really know if that's the case or not. But if you watch a lot of shows, you'll probably see it where it's really cool premise. But then the rest of the season just kind of goes off the rails and doesn't really follow through with what the pilot episode established, or even the concept established. TV pilots may be much longer than the episodes in a series. For drama pilots, they might be 2 hours instead of 1. For comedy, like a sitcom or something like half-hour shows, they might have an hour-long pilot. And occasionally a pilot is produced by a non-network team or individual and then shown to networks to see if there's interest. So the pilots are usually longer, and that's usually because they want to try to establish everything, especially with how difficult a TV show is and how many characters, how complex it might be. They might have it extra long to fill everything in. I know Battlestar Galactica, the remake, I think it came out in like 2005, 2006, something like that. But they had a 2-hour-long episode for the first episode because they needed to establish a lot of different things: the background, the culture, the planets, the people, all sorts of things. So they had to establish all that within 2 hours to grab everyone's attention. And that's why a pilot episode might be a lot longer than the rest. And then with the non-network team coming in and making it, that's people that believe in their product, but maybe they weren't able to sell a pilot script. No, none of the networks were takers. And so they decide that they're going to go ahead and make the first episode to show what it will be like instead of just a script. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, but it definitely gives a better visual representation of what the show is like. And so it can help to illustrate it. It's just going to cost a lot of money, just like any kind of filming and entertainment that you do. This stuff comes from WeScreenplay.com. I think that is also in the syllabus. Yeah, so it's letter G in the syllabus, WeScreenplay.com. When writing a TV pilot, you need to set the groundwork for what the show will be, who the characters are, and more. The premise, first, what is your show? What's the genre and the plot? Is it a sitcom about a group of friends? Is it a drama about a girl growing up without her parents, etc.? Like, what is it about? What is the premise? Then what themes will this show touch on? What is the central message of the show? Is it that even if life's hard, it's still worth pushing on? Maybe that's for the girl. Is it that you can always move forward no matter what happens? It's kind of along the same line, but different themes like that. What is the central theme? What is the central message you're trying to put out there that will get, that will follow along through the show? What is the overarching message, the theme that is going to envelop the show? Pilots need to establish the main character or characters if there's multiple. Who are they? What do they like? How do they know each other or connect, if at all? And how do they interact with each other? I think I had a good, This Is Us, the pilot episode of This Is Us really illustrated that really well with the characters, because it was like, if you haven't seen it, it starts out with like a couple and there's a few other characters that seemingly aren't really connected until at the end it's shown. Well, this is a spoiler warning if you don't want to know, but they're shown that they are it's shown that they're a family in the end of the first episode.
And it's being set over different timelines.
Yeah, so you're seeing the mom and the dad as they were younger, when they were first having their children. And then you are seeing these 3 other adults living their life. And then it's shown that we were watching the past with the parents and the present with the 3 children, one that is adopted.
The first episode follows the mother. She's about to give birth to the triplets and how they lose one of them and end up adopting another. And then because one of the things that throws you off is that one of them is a different race than the other 2. And so you don't guess it right away because she's pregnant with triplets. So unless there was a surprise for the dad there, you don't really, get it. But then you kind of see this beautiful story and you're like, towards the end, you're like, wait a minute. And then you have the realization that though you were watching the three kids as adults.
And you see that they interact with each other in the present, and they interact with the mom and dad after it's revealed. And so it's, who are these people? How do they connect to each other? And how do they interact with each other? And it all sums up in that pilot episode.
That wasn't just a good example of how to introduce characters, but it was also a really good example of how to balance different timelines and how to blend them, make them come together.
Right, which is very difficult to do.
At least what of it, the amount
especially
of it.
In a pilot episode that already has to establish a lot. So yeah, it definitely was an interesting way to go about showing it. You don't have to give all the details about the character in the pilot. In fact, learning more about the characters as the show goes on is often what keeps people coming back. But having their personality and their general demeanor in the first episode is important. How are they? If they grow, if they change over the season, that's fine. But how are they acting in the current moment? Who are these people? Why do I care? And that is very important to establish in the pilot season.
Yeah, I would say for me personally, I feel like giving us, you don't have to tell me everything about the character in the pilot episode, but at least show me what about them is interesting and what about them makes me care about them. Give me something that will make me initially invested. You don't have to give me their entire life story. You don't have to give me their entire personality off the bat or their entire plot line off the bat, but just something to make me want to know more about them, to make me start to care about them and want to know what happens and where they go.
Yeah, I agree. You want to have questions. You want to know, like, where is this, like, a TV pilot has to establish that stuff so that people want to know more. They want to know where the story's going. They want to know who this character is and more about them. And so giving little interesting tidbits on here and there will help to sell your story to get people to want to watch it more. And that will help, the networks want to see it again.
And if it's non-linear, like if it's not like an ongoing storyline, why do I find this character interesting? Why do I want to know more about them? Why do I want to keep following them? They seem fun. They seem interesting. They seem funny. They seem relatable. Those kinds of things.
What is their personality? Are they kind of scummy? Are they kind of dirty-minded? Are they shy and awkward? Those are the main things.
The environment that they are around, is it interesting?
Are they the funny one? Are they trying to be funny, but they're not, and it's intentionally supposed to be that way? Those kinds of things are the things you want to establish in your pilot episode to show at least like what their personality is or what they're struggling with their who they are.
One example, and I know like I said, we bring up Friends a lot because it's a show that almost everyone knows. I feel like when I watched the pilot, I don't remember the first time I ever watched it because I watched it very young, but when I watched the pilot, and I watch it almost once a year, I remember thinking one of the first times I watched it, seeing Ross come in with that umbrella just being, hi, you automatically knew, okay, this one over here, like certain aspects of their personality, like Chandler with his one line sarcastic comment, you could see kind of what those characters were about and like the beginning of who they were just from a small line or from an interaction with each other. And that was so cool. I think that that's what made it one of the most successful pilots ever, because it really gave the characters personality in a way that was so distinctive and so like it caught your attention, but it also was very obvious. Is that the word I want to use? I don't know if it's the correct word I want to use, but I just mean like it was very engaging, and it was very like not in your face, not like, oh, this one's the funny one, this one's the sarcastic one. Some people may think that. In my opinion, I think it was just, okay, this is the dynamic we're working with, but it's still funny. It's not just exposition.
Yeah. All right.
Because
So
they
when I
did a
said
lot
the
of
funny one, I
exposition.
was meaning like, do they try to tell jokes and are they successful with it or are they not? Not as much like, are they the funny one? Because that is more
I
of
just
like an
remember that they
anybody.
did a lot of exposition in that first episode, and they had to explain who was Carol and why was Ross upset and what was happening with Rachel and their love lives and their work lives and all this stuff. And they did it in such a seamless way of just friends talking. And it didn't feel like exposition, at least not to me. But then again, I'm a little biased, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, I agree. Like they did a really good job. And so a pilot really needs to establish all of those things and who these people are and how they interact with each other so that you can kind of expect what's going to come next. Next is what kind of structure will your show be in? Is there going to be voiceovers and narration? Is the show's episodic with a new villain or a case or emergency each episode? Or is it a linear, continuous story that ends in cliffhangers? Or just, keeps going without ending in cliffhangers. Yeah. How much comedy, drama, mystery, and etc. does the show have? And what's the ratio? Is it like 80% comedy, 20% drama? All of these things need to reflect in the pilot, which is why pilot scripts are so hard to create, because they have to establish the whole show, all the characters, the structure of it. So Scrubs, he was narrating over the whole thing right away, right off the bat. We know that JD is going to be narrating what is happening because we are watching this show through his lens, through his mind, and how he sees this hospital and how he interacts with people. With the Friends, there wasn't any narration, and it was set up in a way where it had very like 1, 2, 3 jokes, like 1, 2, like setting up the jokes and then executing them. So it was very clear how this show was going to be structured. And so that is also very important for any pilot is what is this show going to be like, and how is it going to work from here on? Does the show center around 1 or 2 characters, or does it go back and forth between different ones? Think Breaking Bad, where it centers on what's his name, Walter White, versus Game of Thrones, where it's a ton of different people. So you have to the pilot needs to show whether it's going to be mainly about 1 or 2 people, or whether it's going to be about people in different circumstances, and there's many different characters to explore.
That's another thing I was going to say. With the example of Game of Thrones, they had a lot of characters and a lot of characters to introduce. But with the pilot, they had to be like, okay, we need to focus on these main families and the main people in these main families. And we have to pick. I look at it as, okay, we have to choose. Yes, there's a lot of world building and there's a lot of characters and a lot of things these people need to know, but we have to choose who are we going to introduce first and why it's important for that to be the catalyst of everything. Because it's hard. It is really hard when you have a show that has a lot of characters to, especially in the pilot, to where, okay, we don't have to introduce all of them, but we at least have to introduce the main ones, if not all of them, depending on the size. And we have to make it seem like we're not throwing an extra person around, or like we're setting up for something if we have to introduce more down the line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why it's really difficult to it's really difficult to pull off what Game of Thrones did pull off, because clearly it came from books, so he pulled it off in the books. But even in books, even in writing anything in general, multiple characters is hard to pull off, especially.
I was going to say writing, especially. I read a lot of books, and when you have multiple characters and multiple POVs, like in the Song of Ice and Fire, where each chapter is a different POV, it can get confusing. It can get really like, wait, who are we? Whose head are we in now?
Not just that, but it's also like, I really like this character and how they think, and I want to, now it's another character. So sometimes you have to make it like that, and people have their favorite characters, but they need to be liking the other characters enough to want to keep watching, especially with something like Game of Thrones where characters die. And that's why a lot of shows don't actually kill off their characters. But me personally, I like when they do, because it actually builds, raises the stakes, makes it more interesting. Like, is this actually going to happen?
It doesn't make it like, oh, he's the main character, they're not going to kill him. There's no urgency in this because he's probably going to get out somehow.
But yeah, so that is something you have to set up in your pilot episode. Is this going to be about one person? Is it going to be about two people that are always next to each other? Is it going to be about two people but they are never next to each other, so it's actually like skipping back and forth between two characters? Or is it just a whole bunch of different people that we're seeing different perspectives of different things from?
Even then, though, I feel like if you're building a pilot, they have to connect somehow. It doesn't have to be like a huge connection, but at least enough to where it doesn't feel like you're just showing a bunch of random people, or you're trying to do storylines, but they have nothing to do with each other. I feel like there has to be at least like a tiny thread connecting them, even if it's a little thing. That's just my opinion, I suppose, because I feel like it can get a little, like, especially in that when you have completely different things, where it's like you care more about one side than the other, and one side doesn't really have anything to do with the other, and your brain automatically, at least mine, goes to, okay, what do these things have to do with each other? Or what are they set in the same universe? Or are they in different aspects of the world? Are they in different planets, different perspectives? What's going on? Like, your brain is trying to connect it and understand why we're seeing these people's stories together in a show.
Right. And that is usually why, like in This Is Us, even though it felt like it was disjointed, like they didn't have anything to do with each other, eventually at the end of the episode, you get to see that they are all connected in some way. I think Super 8, I believe that's the name of the show on Netflix.
You're talking
it's
about
like 8 different stories in the pilot, and you don't really know how they connect, but then they have that slight sliver of connection with the powers or whatever it is. And so, everything they usually connect. What?
Sense8.
What?
It's called Sense8, I think you're talking about.
Sense8. Okay, yeah, that's the one. And so it's 8 different people, and you don't really know how they connect until the end, when they connect through this lady and some power and something. So,
and even then, you don't really know. You're just like, oh, they're connected somehow through this, but you have no idea how. You just know that they are.
Right. And that sets it up for the rest of the show. So the pilot episode needs to set it up or it needs to at least point in the direction of how these people might be connected. If you're paralleling one person compared to another, and you're showing the differences in their lives, you might not lead up to the point where you show exactly how they're connected, but you'll show enough hints to give the audience to be able to then for them to think like, oh, okay, so this might be how they're connected. And then as the show goes on, they start to see how they connect.
And sometimes it's something as little as just different perspectives, different contrasting viewpoints, or contrasting life experiences. It doesn't always have to be like they're the same family, or they're in the same world, or sometimes it can be opposites, or sometimes it can be mirroring each other. It can just be connecting in theme.
Right. It's also important to note that shows can deviate from their pilot structure, but it's important for a pilot to give the idea of how the show will go. So as the show goes on, they might not keep the exact same structure that they had in the pilot episode, but generally they don't do a 180 and completely flip what the show is after the pilot episode establishes at least the idea and the semi what the structure will be. They stick to it to some extent. I don't really know off the top of my head any shows that had a pilot episode that just felt completely different from the rest of the show. So maybe there are, but generally speaking, most shows will stick to the most part what the pilot episode established with structure. And
especially because the pilot is what's supposed to draw you in, right? So if you immediately make it completely different, then people are going to be like, well, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. This is not what I signed up for.
Right.
You can make it different in a way that like it subverts your expectations, but not different in a way that it's a completely different tone. It's a completely different genre. It's a completely,
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then like Priscilla just said, what's the hook? There needs to be a hook that leaves people wanting more. This could be the dynamic between characters. It could be relationships, a will they, won't they kind of thing. It could be a cliffhanger of what the story might bring and more. There's many things that can make people want to come back to watch it again. And the hook might just be like, the friends, it was just friends hanging out for the most part. Like you could say you came back to see how Ross ended up about his divorce and how Rachel and Monica ended up by being roommates. But the main hook for that show is just the dynamic between the characters and how they interact. Ross liking Rachel, of course.
A lot of people argue that Rachel is the real protagonist because she's the one that went through the most character development. But at the end of the day, it's more like how these contrasting personalities just living their lives in their 20s. They're fun to watch, and I wonder what's going to happen in their lives and where they're going to go from here.
Right. And so it's mainly about the characters of that show that's drawing people in to go in to see what are these characters going to do next? How are they going to interact? How are they going to act during this situation? That sounds funny. That sounds interesting.
Oh, the first episode did end on somewhat of a cliff, like with Ross said he'd maybe ask Rachel out sometime in the first episode.
And so that establishes that whole dynamic for the entire show is the will they, won't they between those two characters. So that is a huge thing that gets established right off the bat in the pilot episode. And so those are...
and foreshadowed a lot throughout that episode, especially because it's not just that scene at the end, but also when he was like looking at the window and there was a contrast between her looking at the window and him looking at the window and the U2 song playing and that kind of thing.
All right, this next step comes...
Sorry. I said they were hitting heavy on that one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's a central part of Friends is that dynamic between those two characters. So it definitely helps drive the show. And of course, a lot of people came back and they wanted to know.
Even though
watch their relationship progress, dissolve,
I feel like,
progress again. So
yeah, good. I was going to say that's a good example actually of a show that changed throughout the years because in the first few seasons it was very will they, won't they, Ross and Rachel. But after a while it became just more about all of the friends and Ross and Rachel kind of had their own lives. And it was a little will they, won't they, but for the most part, it wasn't as much about them anymore or as focused on their relationship as it was in earlier seasons.
Right. And so it can deviate a little bit from what it was established in the pilot episode, but the structure overall is still the same episode to episode for the most part. All right, so this stuff comes from, I think it's liveabout or liveabout.com. I'm pretty sure it's liveabout, but I don't know. H, if a network likes the pilot, they may buy just a handful of episodes, or sometimes they'll buy a full season. Traditionally with networks, they receive brief elevator pitches in the summer, request full scripts, and then they accept pitches in the fall, where they will decide to or not to produce a pilot. If they decide to, then filming for pilots would begin around January to spring. Now, this is the traditional way of doing it. With streaming services recently, it's not as much in the time slots as it used to be. It can kind of happen year round now for a lot of shows if it's going to be a streaming service show. But
it depends more on the story and where it's being filmed and what time they need more than specific pilot season situation.
Right. But traditionally with networks, and there's still 5 major networks that do it. I don't know if I have the notes for it, but I think it's like Fox, AMC, and a few others. And they still typically follow this exact scheduling where, so they receive like these brief pitches in the summer. And if they like those pitches, they'll request full scripts. And then in the fall, they will read those scripts and they will accept some of those pitches that they like the full script of. And then they will bring that back after they go on vacation for December, like winter break or Christmas break or whatever you want to call it. They come back and they all talk about what they read, what they liked. Executives and networks, they actually read scripts throughout their holidays, so they're not really off of work. They actually read through scripts and stuff to see if they're going to have anything to bring to the table when they go to discuss with the rest of those executives what shows they might want to produce or what they might not want to. And then they come back and they talk about all that and they decide if they want to do it or not. And if they decide that they do want to do it, then the filming for the pilots would begin around January or spring the next year. So you pitch an episode to them, you pitch a small, like, this is what it's about, small paragraph to them in summer of the year before. And then if they like that in the fall or somewhere around there, you'll give them a full episode. If they like that, they'll tell you about it around Christmas break sometime, or like right after they come back in January, and they'll say, hey, we're going to go ahead and let you do a pilot episode. So, you know, then they'll figure out if you need to put together a team or if they need to put together a team for you, and they'll work all those details out. But the filming will be from January to spring, and it will wrap up around March or April. Then the networks decide which ones to greenlight around May. And then they decide what to start, what to get a full season or a few episodes around that time. And you'll start shooting it in the after May, and from that year for however long it takes to shoot your show for that season or for those episodes that they ordered. And if they like the episodes, if they only order a few episodes, then they kind of like the pilot, but they don't like it enough to put a huge amount of money in. So they're trying to see how these episodes do before they order more. If they order a whole season, it means that they like it pretty well and they're ready to go. Some shows get lucky, especially if they're with people that have worked on successful shows before. Some TV pilots will get picked up and they might get greenlit for a season, and in the middle of production, they might get greenlit for a second season. It just depends on how much faith and how much risk the network is willing to put in to that show. There's also what's called a backdoor pilot, which is made featuring characters or a plot in an already successful series for a new spinoff, prequel, or sequel series. Mandalorian recently did this a bunch in multiple episodes so that they could start branching off to other Star Wars series, miniseries, and spinoffs. They were introducing a bunch of different characters and seeing how they did instead of actually ordering and testing out a pilot episode for each of those characters. They just brought them into the already successful Mandalorian show and saw, oh, people do like this. It was received well. Maybe we can make a spin-off show out of this. And that's called a backdoor pilot, when they bring the character or the plot in to see if it works. And if it does, they spin off a show from it. Disney does that a lot with a lot of their, even their kid shows. They do it a lot. So they'll just bring in things to see what works, what doesn't. And that way they don't have to actually create a whole episode dedicated to it when they don't even know if they want a season or not of that show. And if they don't want it, it's just like, oh, well, that's a bad episode of Mandalorian, which everyone likes. So, oh, well, you know, it doesn't really do anything. But if they did it the other way, where they're doing TV pilots for everything and people don't like it, then they just spend a bunch of money on a TV pilot that isn't going to go anywhere, and they just have to drop it and eat the costs, which is why a big network will typically try to see if they can do a backdoor pilot here and there as much as they can. This next stuff comes from ultimatepopculture.fandom.com. So that's I in the syllabus. Pilots are usually, but not always, the introductory episodes aired to audiences. Some networks may want a TV pilot presentation, which isn't a whole pilot episode, but instead it's a one-day shoot that, when edited together, it gives a general idea of the look and feel of a proposed show. And those are usually between 7 to 10 minutes long. So if they like the idea, but they aren't completely sure, they're not going to order an entire episode. They're just going to let you film for a day with the cast and crew and everybody, and try to see if what you made in that day, if it kind of feels like they want to order a whole episode, or if they want to order a whole season out of that. Sometimes off of the presentation, a show will be ordered, and occasionally they'll order a full pilot episode first before fully deciding on creating the series or not. It usually happens the other way because they're trying to save money, but they still want to see if it's going to work. They don't have too much faith in it, so they want to just see a small pilot episode, like not even a whole episode, really. It's just like, part of an episode to see if it works. And then they can decide if they want to order a season. If they decide then to order only a full pilot episode, that still means that they don't have as much faith in that show, in that series, because they want to see a whole pilot episode before they then order the rest of the season. So it can go in a lot of phases like that. So even if you get a successful TV pilot bought by a network, or you pitch it to a network and you get to create one of these presentations, it doesn't necessarily mean that even if they like the presentation, they might want then a full episode. And then after that, they might want to say, okay, yes or no. And so it can go through those stages. So you never really know if you have the show or not until you finally get greenlit. And that could be months and months later, or even years later, depending on how long they hold on to your script or your pilot episode. If a network orders a 2-hour pilot, it will usually broadcast the pilot as a TV film to recoup some of the costs, even if it doesn't intend to purchase it. So going back to Battlestar Galactica, they had that 2-hour episode. I believe they actually put it on TV as a TV film, because that way they get some advertising money. Advertising slots are filled for that to be shown. So even if they were like, this isn't going to work, we don't like it, they still have that 2-hour long pilot episode that can act as a TV movie. And they'll usually just show it on TV, recoup a little bit of their money, and then just eat the rest of the costs that they put into it. Because obviously, a 2-hour show, it's a lot of money to make. So it's basically like a film, but on a much smaller budget. Sometimes also, in place of a pilot episode or a pilot presentation, they'll just ask for a demo or a sizzle reel, which will be requested, or a sizzle reel will be requested. This is usually made to show the cast and the feel of the show without paying for sets. And often it's using amateur equipment. So they're just like, let's see what you got. Let's see the feeling and the, kind of the vibe of the show without us even giving you the studio set for a day and without us paying for a pilot episode. Here's way less money. Just film it with whatever you've got and with whatever cast you have, and we'll see if we like it or not. And then we'll go from there to maybe request a presentation or a pilot episode after we see that. All right, this next stuff comes from letter M, Christopher Ming, ChristopherMing.com. The streaming services have begun changing what the traditional pilot season was, but for now, the major TV networks typically still follow the same scheduling. Each summer, studio execs hear upwards of 500 pitches for new potential pilots. Out of those, around 70 per network are requested a pilot script due on their desk by a certain date. So out of 500, they pick around 70 and go, okay, these sound like they could be something. Write the whole episode out and have it on my desk by this month from now, basically. 2, 3, 4 months from now, whatever date they get. During the 2-week December break, executives take the scripts home to read. After the break in January, executives discuss things like creative and staffing issues and other details about which shows might work best for their network. Out of the 70, 20 to 30 scripts per network are chosen for pilot episodes or presentations. Out of those, once pilots are made, 5 to 16 or more varied. It depends on the year and the network. CW might pick up around 5, where NBC might pick up 16. But those ones are picked up, and the series are picked up by networks to be made either a handful of episodes or a season. So out of the 70, they do 20 to 30 pilot episodes or presentations. Out of the 20 to 30, they pick up about 5 to 16 of them, depending on what the size of the network and how many good ideas they feel like came out of it. Many sources are agreeing that now new pilots can be made whenever. So pilot season in January, April to April still exists, but it in a much more spread out now with less condensed time for all pilot scripts to be filtered through, which can be good because it gives more time for an executive to look through different scripts. They don't have them all at the same time and just skipping it. No, they have to read through so many scripts that if it doesn't catch their eye right away, they might throw it because of that. But now because of streaming services, it's a little more spread out. It's still typically around the same time of year for pilot season, but it's not as exact anymore. And because of that, they might have more time to look through it and not be feeling so dreadful of reading 500 different ideas. And so they can have a better, different people can have a better chance of getting their script read and liked and pitched and whatever else to get it running along into an actual show. Instead of like, oh, I don't like the way this first paragraph is, I'm going to toss it out because I have to read 500 more of these things. So that's a good thing for creatives and writers. There's also what's called episodic season, which is when guest stars, side recurring characters, and others come in because new show seasons are being filmed. Traditionally, that was around August to November, because that would be after the new 5 to 16 shows are picked up. And so they're starting to create it around August and November. And so that's when all the guest stars and all of the side characters and stuff, if they're going to be recurring characters, that's when they can come in and get their acting gigs, because that's when the episodes are filming. But now, while it exists, it still exists. It is also much more varied because of streaming services and things like that. So episodic season can be the whole year now. It doesn't have to be just a few months. Again, it probably is condensed mostly to these months still, just because of the networks. But the more we go towards streaming services, the more it's going to start varying out and being any time of year that these things occur. So out of the shows that are picked up, only a fraction get a second season. And then out of those, only a very small percentage go on to successfully wrap the show after several seasons. And then on top of all of that, only a very, very, very small percentage are viewed favorably for their endings. So there's all of that. It gets narrowed down a lot as you go from step to step to step. And a lot of those shows that get picked up, they never have another season. They just have that one season and they're done. Other shows that get picked up for a second season, they might get canceled because they're getting too expensive. Rome, and for HBO, it got 2 seasons and then it was getting too expensive, so they had to cancel it. while other shows will keep going on and on and on and on, and people will lose interest, so they'll end up getting canceled. So a much smaller percentage will wrap up successfully. And then when they do wrap up, like Game of Thrones, you know, they're not viewed very favorably for their endings and the way they ended everything. So if you look at all the shows out there and you think about like all the ones that actually ended and that people like the ending of, it's very, very few, even the most popular shows. So
I feel like using Game of Thrones is a bad example though, because that was a very rushed, very lazily put together final season.
Universally hated, so I feel like
most of the time people don't like it because it either goes on for too long because the original writers had a certain plan for a certain number of seasons, and the network is like, nope, we're giving you more money, we want another season. Or it's because they had an ending planned from the start, and with the amount of seasons, the characters changed and the dynamics changed, and the ending that they had planned didn't work anymore. Like How I Met Your Mother was a good example of that. Or sometimes it doesn't meet people's expectations, like with Lost, because it was that's another universally hated one, because people had so many fan theories and so many ideas, and the ending ended up being either underwhelming or just plain disappointing as well. So there's a multitude of reasons why a lot of endings don't live up to people's expectations or don't end up being favorable or loved by the general public.
Right. But yeah, so that all stems from these TV pilots, these first episodes. Again, sometimes the pilot is made and then a new pilot is created. So it's not the new one that's created isn't really the pilot that launched the show. It's just the first one that was aired, because that other pilot is never going to be shown because it has different actors, or it has some kind of legal issues, or it has something that it just wasn't as good as they'd like it to be, but they do like the show, so they remake it at a higher budget. Different reasons, but sometimes the first episode that and the first episode that is called the pilot wasn't actually the pilot that was created to launch the show, at least from the network's side. And all of that stuff stems from these pilot episodes, and why it's so important for them to draw the attention of first the networks and then audiences after that, to get people to come back, get people to keep watching, get people to want to watch more of this show and want to put money into more of this show for the network side. And this is the way that independent creators and writers can try to get a show made. Pilot episode scripts is the main way that a independent creator, an independent writer is going to get a TV show created, because TV shows are so expensive and there's not any independent TV made really, because it's just so expensive. You can't just go out and make a TV show pretty much. You have to have some kind of backing almost always, unless you just want it to look like complete crap, just because it's so long, it's so much work, and so it takes a lot of people to create it. And so the way an independent creator, an independent writer can make a TV show is by making a pilot episode. Maybe they can make the pilot episode, but you still usually want to get backing for that so that you can show how good this show will be. So you still need to find some kind of investment money somewhere to make it, kind of like you're making a film, or you're trying to launch a series and you're trying to gain attention from networks. But typically, the first way to try to gain attention from networks is with pitches and with TV pilot scripts. That's going to be the best way to try to get them, maybe not the best way to get their attention. An actual episode might be better to grab their attention, but it'll be the easiest way for an independent creator or writer to try to get a television show produced. It's just by pitching an idea and then pitching a pilot episode script. After that, if you're still not getting any takers and you have a show that you really think would work, then you might want to try to get funding and backing to make a pilot episode to show the networks this is what it's like, or at least make a sizzle reel or something like that to show them before they even ask for it. That way they don't have to just read the script. They can see something, see what you're going for. Mood boards, lookbooks, TV Bibles, all of those things will help to pitch a TV show pilot if you're trying to get a TV show made. So keep all that stuff in mind. The other way, which we're getting ready to talk about, is web series. And even then, those are expensive, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But just do either of you have any other questions, comments, or anything to add about TV pilots? All right, so the next thing is web series. Web series is another way that independent creators and independent writers can try to make a TV show, is get a web series made for a much, much, much smaller budget than you would have on an actual TV show, and then try to pitch that kind of like a TV show pilot, or like to show visually what you're going for, to gain on an audience and show that there is an audience for this, that there is interest in this idea, so that a network is more inclined to give you funding for an actual full-fledged show, or a season anyway. This stuff comes from lifewire.com and is letter E in the syllabus under web series. Web series are designed episodically like a TV series. They are much cheaper to create than a TV series and really can be made by anyone with a camera. Occasionally, let me just go to this actually. Occasionally, a web series can grow so popular that it makes its way to television. Other web series are produced by large media networks and receive some exposure, the same exposure that TV series receive. These shows can also make it to TV. Web episodes can be released at any time, watched by audiences at any time, and can be any length. However, most web series fall around 3 to 15 minutes long for each episode. Some filmmakers and producers post web series to their own site or a site created for the series. Others upload it to YouTube or similar video platforms. This next stuff comes from scriptmag.com, letter G. If you can't get a network to notice your pilot script, making a web series of short 2-minute bite-sized bits that is your pilot episode broken down and revamped for that format can be used to, 1, try to get some audience engagement, and 2, be used as a proof of concept to send along with your pitch to the networks again. So you're trying to get your pilot episode, but they're not taking it, doing a web series on like really cheap, 2 minutes per thing, trying to gain an audience with it. They say is one way you can try to go ahead and get some attention onto your idea. Many web series are cheaper than TV, and many have had successful crowdfunding campaigns to help fund their web show, which also creates a built-in audience. With a web series, you don't have the rules or limitations the networks give you. You have full control of the narrative, so you can tell whatever story you want and however you want to tell it. Web series are usually much faster to make than TV and film, so you can also create content faster. And this next stuff comes from hwebseries.news. If you are able to get a deal with a studio or media company to make a web series, then they'll give you a certain budget for the whole season or for each episode. They typically look for 8 to 10 episodes in a season. You'll get an executive producer fee, which will usually be around 10% of the production budget. So you'll get to keep that money and then put the rest into the actual show and paying people, the crew and all that. Normally, the studio will assign a production company to you, but if you're established and will be making the thing in your own company, you'll typically get a 5% fee of the total budget. If someone else is doing it, they'll get that fee instead. Sometimes you can negotiate a separate talent fee so that the studio can get larger named actors, but that's going to bypass the production budget. So you don't get 10% of that or 5% of that budget for executive producer fees or EP fees. So basically they will give, sometimes you can negotiate to have more money for talent only, and that won't go towards your budget of 10% or your fee of 10%, or the studio company making it, their 5% fee. It'll just go straight to talent only and bypass the budget. With larger websites, you'll get brand sponsors that want to be shown in your series. These aren't, or at least don't have to be cheesy and aren't selling out. So if anybody tells you that, don't listen to them, because you need money. And so having a brand is good. Having a brand sponsor can be really good, as long as they're not trying to overtake your whole show and change the way it feels by, show off our thing and make sure you do it for 30 seconds. Then that's a little questionable. But if it's just like somebody in your show has to comment that they like drinking a certain soda, then it's not really going to affect your show, and you might as well do it because you're going to get money for it. So some people consider that selling out, but only if they're trying to change what your show is. And typically they don't. They just want to have somebody show or say what their brand or their item or whatever they are trying to sell is. Even though web series are made much cheaper than TV, they're still really expensive. So I actually want to go over a web series that did a successful Kickstarter campaign. I actually watched the show. It got bought up by Netflix, I think, but it was called Video Game High School. And they did a Kickstarter campaign that reached way over its goals, but still doesn't cover its first season costs. I will point out that this series was more like a traditional TV show. So that does add costs. It was more like the length of the show's episodes and everything were way more like an actual TV show than a web series. And also, there are some web series made for a few $1,000s, but it really just depends on what you're making. However, most web series do not make a profit and often come in at a loss. So it's mainly just to either get your story out there, or it's to try to get it picked up as a TV show, not to make money. Most web series don't make money. So I actually wanted to
concept to show people what you can do.
Yeah, that too. Show your skills, if you build a reel, those kinds of things.
Yeah. A few examples is that the Bel Air show that is on HBO Max right now was also somewhat of a short, just showing their ideas. There's a Mass Effect one that was created that apparently is being turned into a TV show or being pitched as a TV show, if I'm not mistaken. So there are examples of basically them using that short and sending it to studios and being like, this is what we can do with a small budget. This is our potential. Imagine what we can do with a bigger budget, or this is the story we want to tell. If you give us the budget, we can do 10 times more. Or sometimes it's just to create your reel, something you're passionate about. They did a Star Wars short film based on, I believe, a book. The Revan was a book, right, honey? Based on a video game series from Star Wars, and it was immensely successful. And they did it more as a passion project, but also just showing people the story they wanted to tell and what they could do with it with a small budget.
Right. And so these aren't those, especially if you're making any kind of fan film or fan show, you can't get any money from that. You can get donations sort of, but like it depends on what company you're trying to do a fan fiction of. I don't think Disney allows you to get donations because it's sort of considered as payment. So I'm not sure exactly how it works. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It just depends. But you're not allowed to get money from someone else's IP. So if you're making a fan series or you're making a fan project, just know that you aren't making any money. You're doing it to either show your skills, to tell a story, or just to do it, but not to make any money. But same thing, even if it is your own individual idea, it still is most likely not going to make money if it's a web series. So that's just something you have to keep in mind. This is for you to gain knowledge, experience, skills, show what you can do, or show your idea and what it's capable of to networks, audiences, and things like that, not to make money.
Another thing is, if you're doing a fan film, yeah, you might not make money, but if you're a fan of that and you get a community of also fans that like your work, you got a built-in audience, which is awesome. Not everyone, obviously, some people are just there for that, but some people will see your work and be like, hey, you're cool, I want to support you, you know, and you have somewhat of a entryway into gaining an audience that way.
Right. All right. So this was a show that was made by Freddie Wong. He was the one that was doing the Rocket Jump Film School and Rocket Jump Productions. I think that was their name. Rocket Jump. Anyway. And they got enough people interested in stuff to do a successful Kickstarter campaign. Their goal was $75,000. And they ended up raising $273,000, which is a lot. But their first season of the show ended up being $636,000, which they got paid for by investors and things like that. Once they saw people were interested in seeing something like this, they were more willing to give out some money for it. $636,000 for one season of a web series is a lot. And there was another show, Halo Forward Unto Dawn. It was a web series and it cost over $7.5 million. So web series and that's a fraction of, I don't know how much the new Halo show costs, but if we're saying that it costs as much as like Game of Thrones and things like that, that's like 10 million an episode. So it does cost a fraction of TV, but TV costs a huge amount of money. So it's still, to an independent creator, it's still a lot of money to create a well-made web series. Season took 277 days of production, 167 people, and received over 36 million views on YouTube. The most expensive factor was the crew, $123,000, 507. And then post-production, $116,000. So let's see. They broke it down. If you guys want to go, it's business2community.com. The number 2, business, the number 2, community.com. And I'll go over a little bit of this just to glance at it. But if anyone wants to go in and actually look deep into this, you can. It's letter J in the syllabus under web series. But they break it down showing where the money went, how many days, how many people watched it, how much money they put into art design, how much money it cost for pre-production, $21,000, art department, $42,000. The cast cost $26,000. The crew, overall, the entire thing, $123,000. That's just for production and pre-production. They said post-production was something else. Food, $22,000. Location fees, $47,000. Stunts, $18,000. Cameras, $9,000, which actually really isn't that bad. Production equipment, $16,000. Transportation, $25,000. Post-production, $116,000. And they show the number of visual effects shots. Video Game High School had 612 visual effects shots. It's based in video games. They're going to high school to train in video games to get better, to get like a degree in video game pretty much. So it's a lot of like virtual reality type of stuff and gunshots and other things that have a lot of visual effects. And they show like 21 Jump Street only had 160. Diary of a Wimpy Kid only had 200. Skyfall had 1,300. But that's kind of like showing where they fall with those kinds of visual effect shots, which end up being a lot of money in post-production. The production office, coordinator and stuff like that, $4,000. Additional from partners, $100,000. We had a lot of production help from our friends at Monster Energy, Razer, Astro, and evike.com. So those are some brands that were in it. The Monster likes to be attributed with gaming and that kind of stuff. I was surprised Mountain Dew didn't take a hold of it, but those kinds of drinks like to be associated with gaming. So something like this falls right into their brand, and they wanted to be a brand partner and gave out some money. So they had like 4 to 5 different brands that gave them an additional $100,000, which is part of where they got more of their money. They also show when they did their Kickstarter campaign, $59,000 went to the fulfillment of giving them the stuff that was promised for the perks. If you give $250, we'll give you a t-shirt. Well, then you have to factor in the costs of all that stuff after it happens. So yeah, they made 200 and what was it? Where was it? $273,000 from their campaign, but then they ended up having to pay $59,000 and $900 to deliver all the stuff, DVDs and Blu-rays, shirts, posters, scripts, supplies, postage, shipping it out to everybody. That was one of the biggest chunks of their cost. Labor, the labor to do that, paying somebody to package it all up, ship it all out, all that kind of stuff. They show making just a single prop. They made it was like a vending machine where you got out a pizza in a can pretty much. So you could like take out a pizza out of a can and eat it or heat it up. I can't remember which, but it was basically just like an idea they had, and they had to make the prop, and that prop ended up costing about $289 to make it work with what they needed. So just one thing, one item. And they utilized it well, but it still, it costs a lot of money to create things from scratch and make it work, make it be functional. And then they show relative budgets normalized by total runtime. Their budget was $0.6 million. Mortal Kombat Legacy, if anyone's seen that, $2.6 million for that web series. The Walking Dead web series before it was a show, $6.8 million. Halo Forward Unto Dawn web series, $7.5 million or more. So independent creators will like to make web series, and some can make them for a few $1,000s, but you're not going to get the production. You're not going to get the production quality that a lot of people think when they are trying to make something and they're like, oh, web series are cheap. You can literally make a web series in your room. And some people do that on YouTube where it's basically just talking to the camera or making something in their room. And, that will cost next to nothing. If you just want to spend all your time on it and you're the only one doing stuff, you'll have to buy a few things like props, whatever else, but you can make a web series like that. So it's not always going to cost a lot. But if you're trying to make a web series that's similar to a show, or you're trying to make it show an idea that you have for a pilot episode, then you want to do it well, you want to sell it to a network, get people's attention, get people watching it to show that there's an audience for it. You have to pour some money into it to get good quality. And so it's not as cheap as a lot of people make it out to seem. Just like with TV, a lot of people act like it's not, like it's looks cheap and crappy, but it's a few $1 million for each episode, even on the cheaper budgets. So media and stuff's a lot of money, but this is one way that people, independent creators will be able to make it or get a better chance of getting funding for it, to be able to show what their idea is capable of before they have to try to just go out in the deep end getting a TV show created with pitching and pilot episodes and stuff like that. But either way they do it, that's the way to do it as an independent creator, either web series or a TV pilot, script or episode. And just getting that funded will be hard, but it's a much better chance than just trying to make an entire TV show. You can't. There's no independent creators that, well, maybe there is, but there's not many, if any, independent creators that make an entire television season that is good quality and goes on actual TV and gets bought by a network. So this next stuff comes from filmtvlaw.com, and that is letter L in the syllabus. A network will only want content that is already on another platform if the content has hundreds of thousands to millions of views. So basically, if you're posting it to YouTube, a network's only going to want it if it's showing that it is capable of getting an audience. If you aren't showing it to people, you're just creating it to show to networks, that's a different story. But if you are making a web series to try to get network backing, to try to get it turned into a TV show, and you're trying to do that by posting it to YouTube or another video site or your own website, you need to draw in viewers and audience a lot to get a network to be interested in it and think that, okay, this is something that people want to watch. Whereas if you're just making it to send to the network, then you're just showing it. It's kind of like part of your pitch. So that's a different thing. If you post your content to YouTube and it only gets a few thousand views, you may be inadvertently making a case why your project doesn't have an audience. You know, it could be it's most likely the marketing and just like the cheap budget that's not gaining a bunch of viewers, but networks aren't going to see it that way. They're going to see it as nobody cares to watch this thing. There's only a few thousand people watching it. So why would we try to put any money into buying a pilot? And so if you're putting it on YouTube or something, just know that it could be actually negative if it doesn't get a lot of views. It could be viewed negatively by networks and inadvertently work against you and what you might have been trying to show networks that it is capable of getting an audience. Networks normally want fresh and new content for their platforms that can't be accessed anywhere else. So it is unlikely they'll pick up a web series that's already on YouTube unless it has a lot of views. The reason Netflix picked up Video Game High School is because it had millions and millions of views. Otherwise, they would never touch it because there's no reason to. Nobody's watching it anyway, and it's already available on YouTube for free. Why are we going to put it on our platform? But, we'll buy it off of YouTube and you take it down from YouTube and we'll put it on our site, our platform, because there's a lot of people that are interested in watching it. And that's the way that was the thinking. That was the way the thinking happened on that. Most web series end up being showcases for directors and producers and not much else. However, web series can also be used as a pitch, like I was just saying. Personally, I would recommend trying to build an audience while you work on scripts and things like that. Like I think building an audience while you're working on the script, while you're having the idea is good. Trying to create the web series and then showing it to networks, trying to be picked up for a full web series or a full TV show. And if there's no interest, then post it online before you post it online and then send it to the networks. That's just personally how I would probably do it. Just because I think if you're trying to build an audience, you're trying to get people interested in the idea of the show, that's one thing. But if you're trying to show it to people, you really have to draw them in somehow to get any interest from networks at that point. So I think it's better to create it and then try to get a network or a media company to make a full-fledged web series out of it or a TV show. And if you get no bites, if you get nobody interested, then just post it online because you have nothing else to lose. And maybe then you'll gain an audience and you can go back to the networks and say, see, I told you, there's a lot of people that are watching it. Do you want it now? and a lot more might be interested in it. However, this would depend on how you get it funded as well. If you use crowdfunding, you have to show them the series, but that doesn't mean you necessarily have to post it publicly to everyone. And having a successful campaign can also help the sellability of the project to networks. There were enough people interested to actually pay me to create this. We met our goal, or we went over our goal. So there is an audience for it if you can reach them, that kind of thing. So those are some things you want to think about when you're talking about a web series, and whether you want to post it on YouTube or if you want to use it as a pitch to a network, or if you just want to try to do a pilot episode and see if that can gain interest before, not pilot episode, a pilot script before you go full in on actually creating the content, which can get really pricey really quickly and take up a huge amount of time. And, up to each individual, whether that's worth it or not. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or anything to add about web series? All right, so last thing I'm going to say is tomorrow, Tuesday. Tomorrow we are going to watch our first movie for the semester. This will be based on production design, specifically color, all the things we learned about with color. We're going to be watching Great Gatsby, The Great Gatsby, I think. Is that the title?
Oh my gosh, where do you pick these movies at? Ugh.
Out of the ones that win for certain awards.
Or the ones that are nominated, or the ones that are known for.
Oh gosh.
Dude, we had the thing was we had 4 categories, right? And a lot of them fell under the same category. So we ended up having to pick one. And this week is supposed to be based on color. And it's a really colorful and dynamic movie. So it ended up being that.
I could have picked Judge Dredd. That movie has the best color ever.
Oh, thank you. See, I have the taste. I'm telling you. No, but yeah, exactly. So we had a few categories. We had 4 categories. We picked a few movies. Well, I went through the research and I picked a few movies. We went through them together and we ended up separating them in 4 categories. A lot of them overlapped, so it was a hard decision. But we came up with The Great Gatsby for color because we thought it was the best representation. Best representation in the ones that we have, because the other ones we have a sci-fi choice, we have a concept
choice.
Huh?
What was your sci-fi choice?
Well, it's not for color. It'll be later on. Star Wars.
Yeah, because we have multiple different, we have one for concept, we have one for miniatures, we have one for color, and we have one for something else, right? Props, yes. And we have those 4 categories. And we had like 4 movies per category on there. And we had to end up separating 1 movie per genre, so it wouldn't be just a fest of all sci-fi or all fantasy or all
historical. We're watching four movies this semester, and they're going to be either a period film, sci-fi, fantasy, or I don't know if we found a modern one or not. And then they're going to be based on either color, miniatures, props, or concept and design.
I know the Great Gatsby isn't the best. Like, it's not loved. It's not like the best movie ever. It could have been better in many ways.
I mean,
I think he's just talking about the length.
Yeah, I'm not debating if it's a good movie or not. It is. I can't, like you guys said, it won a lot of awards. But the movies we've watched over the past semesters is kind of like, you gotta be in a movie.
Oh, dude, the award
you have to be in a movie to see it.
They're long. What can we do?
They're super long. Like, yeah, there's like, oh my God.
I mean, the really good movies are long. That's just a sad reality. Most good movies are long.
I mean, yes and no.
That's the thing. Like, most of the ones that are renowned and known for this and known for that, they're hella long. Okay, at least from what I've seen.
Either way, our meetings go on for like 2 to 3 to sometimes even 4 hours. So watching a movie that's 2 or 3 hours is not big with me.
That is a good point, honey. Thank you.
That's the thing. It doesn't have to be like the movie. You think, oh, it's a movie. But
here's the thing, though. You don't have to watch the entire movie, Brian.
No, I fall asleep every time. Like every movie.
You don't have to watch the whole movie. It's just parts of it so that we can learn and debate about color and the use of it and what they did right and what we can learn from it, that kind of thing, you know?
Just having a discussion based on other movies and other projects that have done it.
Yeah, so you don't have to watch the whole movie. You can like give your points and your discussion opinions in the beginning or in the middle, and then be like, okay, peace out.
I think Dick Tracy would have been a good one for color. That one had really good color.
I think that was on a few of the list. Why did I not? Oh, I couldn't fit that into any category, I think.
It would have been good film noir, and it would have been good for color because it's actually in color. It still is a film noir.
Is that an older one? Because I remember there were a lot of older ones that I had to kick out.
Early 90s, I believe. Late 80s, early 90s.
There were quite a few I had to remove just because they were hard to find online. Like even paying for them, some of them were really hard to find. So that was another unfortunate thing that I had to remove quite a few of them from because of that.
All right. Well, anyway, so tomorrow we're going to be watching Great Gatsby for production design, specifically color. We'll be talking about all the things we've learned this semester with color. And then we will create an exercise based on color, not necessarily about Great Gatsby, but just with some of the things we have in mind and some of the things we discussed.
And we learned from it. And then in a few weeks, we will do the same thing with another category, and Brian will again complain about the length of the movie.
I don't think Star Wars is that long.
What other movie?
Man, imagine if we had picked The Return of the King. This guy'd be dying.
I'm going to stop the recording there, though.